Pleased to introduce our four witnesses today. Mr. Robert Storch was recently confirmed as the Department of Defense Inspector General in December of 2022. He has a long history in the IG community, including serving for 5 years as the National Security Agency's Inspector General. Ms. Diana Shaw serves as the Deputy Inspector General at the Department of State, where she performs the duties of the Inspector General. She has also held leadership positions within the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Office of the Inspector General. Ms. Nicole Andurella is the Acting Deputy Inspector General at the USAID, where she performs the duties of the Inspector General. She has a long history of working with USAID's OIG in various roles. And Mr. John Sopko has been the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction since 2012. He has more than 30 years' experience in oversight and investigations as a prosecutor, congressional counsel, and senior federal government advisor. Very impressive witness panel. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. We appreciate all of you being here today, and we look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your statements, and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on your microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I recognize Mr. Storch to please begin his opening statement.
Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and distinguished members of the committee. The war in Afghanistan was, in the words of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a strategic failure. Despite an investment of more than $2 trillion over 20 years and the sacrifices of more than 2,400 American service members, the U.S.-supported Afghan government and military collapsed almost immediately as U.S. forces began their final withdrawal from the country, resulting in a more rushed and contested non-combatant evacuation. My office has provided robust, independent oversight of DoD activities involving Afghanistan going back to 2005. Congress established the lead IG model for coordinating oversight and reporting on overseas contingency operations in 2013. In 2015, the DoD IG was designated the lead IG for Operation Freedom Sentinel, the U.S. counterterrorism mission against al-Qaeda, ISIS-K, and their affiliates in Afghanistan, and related participation in the NATO-led mission to develop the capacity of the Afghan security ministries and national defense and security forces. As lead IG, my office employs a whole-of-government approach to continuously engage and coordinate with my colleagues here from the State Department OIG, U.S. Agency for International Development OIG, and the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, and many others to develop annual oversight plans and issue quarterly reports that transparently provide information regarding the operation and our oversight of it. With the sunset of OFS following the end of U.S. military presence in Afghanistan, my office's lead IG responsibilities continue with Operation Enduring Sentinel, the mission to conduct over-the-horizon counterterrorism operations and engage with regional partners. To date, we and our partners have issued 31 quarterly reports on OFS and OES. The DoD OIG has issued 223 audit and evaluation reports and advisories related to Afghanistan oversight, containing approximately 1,500 recommendations to improve DoD programs and operations. Last fall, we issued a lessons learned report on U.S. security cooperation activities that analyzed a total of 66 reports from my office and our partners to identify significant challenge areas, including deficiencies with training and advising the Afghan security forces and ministries that resulted in over-reliance on U.S. and coalition forces and a lack of accountability and control for U.S. supplied equipment. In the latter area, my office has issued some 15 separate reports related to the inability of both the DoD and the ANDSF to properly account for a variety of military equipment and property. DoD OIG audits also identified issues with the accountability of U.S. funds that were provided to support the ANDSF, including problems with payroll systems and ghost soldiers and routine theft of fuel and ammunition. Our oversight also identified an over-reliance on U.S. contractor maintenance that persisted throughout the U.S. military withdrawal. As the U.S. military presence was ending, the DoD OIG issued a management advisory that compiled weaknesses from 9 reports regarding concerns about not properly removing sensitive information from controlled inventory and the lack of documentation for the retrograde and disposal of such equipment. We also conducted a classified evaluation of the airstrike that tragically killed 10 civilians, including 7 children, on August 29, one of several reviews related to kinetic strikes by my office. After the Afghan collapse, our lead IG reporting summarized available information regarding the factors contributing to the sudden demise of the Afghan military, while our audits and evaluations pivoted to address time-sensitive issues regarding the multi-agency effort supported by the DoD to evacuate and support refugees. This included assessments of 11 military installations used in that effort, and last August, a lessons learned report on those efforts. We also have a number of completed and ongoing reviews related to DoD support for DHS-led screening and vetting activities, as well as ongoing complementary audits with state and USAID OIGs of withdrawal-related contract closeout costs. Apart from all these programmatic reviews, my office's Defense Criminal Investigative Service has conducted over 500 investigations over the course of the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, resulting in 172 convictions, orders for more than $1.3 billion in monetary recoveries, and over 500 suspensions or debarments. Our audits, evaluations, and investigations contain valuable lessons for the conduct of DoD operations now and in the future, and we will continue to conduct impactful oversight related to Afghanistan and as lead IG to provide joint reporting and oversight of OES. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Department of State Office of Inspector General's Afghanistan-related oversight work. I'm very pleased to be joined today by my counterparts from the Defense and USAID OIGs and the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. We are all here today prompted by memories of the shocking and chaotic scene that unfolded at the Kabul airport during the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan in August 2021. While the department has reported that the United States and its partners ultimately evacuated approximately 124,000 people in the summer of 2021, questions rightfully remain about the planning, intelligence gathering, information sharing, and decisions leading up to the events of that summer. We have questions too, which is why in the months immediately following the evacuation and withdrawal, State OIG launched an independent review to understand not only how the department planned for the non-combatant evacuation it helped execute, but what factors contributed to the confusion and chaos that ultimately unfolded. Today, I can share that we do have some answers to these important questions. In the next few weeks, State OIG will be issuing its first in a series of reports looking at the department's planning for and execution of the evacuation of Embassy Kabul. Although aspects of this work are classified and so cannot be discussed in this forum today, I would like to share a few insights that are appropriate to the setting. And I'll start with the bottom line up front. While the embassy's emergency evacuation planning activities in the lead up to the evacuation generally complied with applicable standards, the department simply was not fully prepared for the full range of challenges it encountered. And the critical question, of course, is why. Our review found that there were several contributing factors. For one, we found that embassy leadership, implementing the position taken at the time by the administration, operated under the understanding that diplomatic operations would continue in Afghanistan after the military withdrawal, and did not want to engage in overt evacuation planning based on concerns that it could spark panic and undermine support for the Afghan government. As a result, communications with embassy personnel were unclear as to the timing and scope of a potential evacuation, leading to confusion and, in some cases, inadequate preparation. In addition, we found that the embassy was not fully prepared to evacuate the number of people it ultimately did. This was due in part to the embassy lacking clearly defined eligibility criteria for the evacuation and using unreliable data about the potential number of evacuees. These issues contributed to the scenes that eventually unfolded at the airport in Kabul, and were further compounded by issues relating to unclear leadership, logistical mishaps, and communication failures that I'm afraid I can't discuss in this setting, but would be happy to brief to Congress in a classified setting when our report is released. While the events of August 2021 have passed, as oversight professionals and as legislators here today, we must grapple with the ongoing ramifications of those events. These include the near doubling of the number of Afghans in need of humanitarian assistance since the Taliban came to power, and the severe curtailment of the rights of women and girls. Further, the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Program, for which the Department of State is primarily responsible, still has more than 152,000 SIV applicants in Afghanistan undergoing processing as of last month. This is why it is so important that we continue to keep a close eye trained on the situation in Afghanistan, which is precisely what we're doing. State OIG has issued 14 Afghanistan-related oversight products since the evacuation, and we have an additional nearly dozen projects planned and ongoing. This oversight work will address 3 primary strategic areas, including additional coverage of the evacuation of Embassy Kabul, support for Afghan evacuees, and the resumption of department programs and operations related to Afghanistan. Our work will provide answers to critical questions and offer recommendations that we hope will prompt positive change. But in closing, I'd like to leave you with one final message. How the department responds to our Afghanistan-related findings and recommendations has the potential to impact its success or failure in other important contexts, including Ukraine and Iraq. It is therefore vitally important that the department continue to embrace and learn from our oversight work. This is true not only for us, but for my colleagues on the panel. Each of us recognizes that our work has long-lasting potential life or death implications, which is why we're so dedicated to robust, independent whole-of-government oversight. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Sangarella.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Office of Inspector General's oversight of USAID's work in Afghanistan. I also look forward to sharing with you lessons learned from Afghanistan that must inform USAID's future programming. I'm honored to be sitting here today with my oversight partners from the Department of Defense, State, and SIGAR. Past and continued oversight of USAID programs and U.S. programs in Afghanistan cannot be done in silos. In joining forces, we avoid duplication of effort, ensure policymakers receive the information they need, and hold accountable bad actors targeting U.S. funds. The chaotic events that occurred during the evacuation impacted our office in a significant and personal way. We had 6 colleagues, local Afghan employees of USAID OIG, that were trying to evacuate with their families. I was not acting as the head of our office at that time, but as a member of our senior leadership team, I was on the live group chat we had linking us with our staff 24/7 as they and their families tried to get to and through the Abbey Gate day in and day out. Those exchanges will stay with me forever. I'm happy to say that our colleagues were eventually able to evacuate and relocate in the United States. I've never been prouder to work at USAID OIG than I was during those months. The generosity and kindness our employees showed in helping their former colleagues as they built new lives in America was inspiring. I also want to recognize all of our Afghan USAID OIG employees over the years who were integral to OIG's work. Without them, the work I'm going to talk about today would not have been possible. From 2001 until the evacuation in 2021, USAID invested $24 billion in Afghanistan. The significant level of investment required a proportionate level of independent oversight from USAID OIG. In 2010, we established a Kabul office to advance our work in country. We issued more than 300 reports covering programs valued at close to $6.4 billion. This work resulted in nearly 800 recommendations to USAID and identified hundreds of millions of dollars in question costs. Our investigative work led to criminal prosecutions, major False Claims Act statements, and suspensions or debarments of 70 companies and individuals. In addition to the direct impact on U.S. government efforts in Afghanistan, our comprehensive body of work provides vital lessons that can inform USAID's responses to complex emergencies around the world. I would like to highlight 3 key lessons today. First, effective monitoring of programming activities is essential in complex environments. USAID must implement and then adhere to standards to ensure effective program oversight. It must also plan ahead to ensure continuity of projects in anticipation of staff reductions. One of our Afghanistan audits found that for 127 projects reviewed in Afghanistan, only 1 award used USAID's monitoring system as intended. Second, USAID must clearly define, measure, and link performance objectives to ensure that programs are actually meeting the established metrics and goals. For example, one of our audits found that USAID did not have policies and procedures in place to verify that payments to a World Bank trust fund were being used for their intended purpose. Third, in conflict zones such as Afghanistan, large sums of funding from outside donors attract corruption and diversion, including to sanctioned groups like the Taliban. USAID must strengthen processes to ensure prompt reporting of criminal activity and ensure accountability over its programs, especially those being implemented by UN and multilateral organizations in Afghanistan today. Our Afghanistan oversight work continues today with planned and ongoing audit work. We also continue to receive allegations pertaining to fraud and diversion. Currently, we have 4 open criminal cases related to Afghanistan and 3 cases we are coordinating on with the World Food Program Office of Inspector General. Our decades of work in Afghanistan yielded important lessons that USAID must apply toward programming in future conflict zones. You have my commitment that my office, in coordination with my oversight partners here today, will continue to provide the comprehensive, independent oversight that is expected for continued U.S. programming in Afghanistan. Thank you for your time. I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Mr. Sopko.
Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, thank you very much for inviting me to come back here to testify. I believe this is the 12th time I've testified before this committee. Unlike my other colleagues here, SIGAR has not been tasked with, nor do we have the jurisdiction to, look at the question of the administration's withdrawal. However, just days after that withdrawal occurred, this committee, in a bipartisan fashion, asked us and directed us to examine the factors that led up to the Afghan collapse and the Afghan withdrawal. Your request, I believe, is extremely critical to today's hearing and your ongoing oversight work, because it provides the context for how the Trump and Biden administration's policy decisions were either effected or carried out. SIGAR's reports, and these are the 2 reports which we have prepared for this committee, are based upon our over 12 years of work in Afghanistan, over 700 audits or reports we prepared, and includes dozens of lessons learned reports on particular issues in Afghanistan. They are also based on over 800 interviews of current and former U.S. and Afghan military and civilian officials. They painstakingly show that the failure to build a democratic, self-sustainable Afghan state, which was the purpose for what's going into Afghanistan, was the result of many decisions made over the course of 4 presidential administrations. From ignoring rampant corruption and the lack of a consistent U.S. strategy to the inability to develop self-sustaining Afghan military forces and institutions, the seeds of August 2021's drama were sown many years before. We found that the 2020 Doha Agreement and the subsequent decision to go through with the withdrawal in 2021 merely exacerbated long-existing problems. Among them, These policy decisions dramatically degraded the morale of the Afghan security forces and compounded the Afghan military's total dependence on U.S. combat and contractor support, which left the Afghan military unable to sustain operations. The Afghan government's own self-denial about the U.S. intent to depart, the exclusion of the Afghan government from the U.S. negotiations with the Taliban, again, systemic corruption, and the insular Afghan government decision-making were additional factors that contributed to the disaster. But remember this, once each administration decided to withdraw our troops and contractors, it was not a question of if, it was rather a question of when the Afghan government was going to collapse. Now, I want to change the subject because there are still major problems with our assistance in Afghanistan that this committee should be alerted to. The United States has appropriated $2 billion for Afghanistan assistance since the withdrawal, and a further $3.5 billion may be available through this newly created Switzerland-based Afghan fund. While I agree, and we all agree, Afghanistan faces dire humanitarian and economic situation, it is critical that our assistance not be diverted by the Taliban. Unfortunately, as I sit here today, I cannot assure this committee or the American taxpayer we are not currently funding the Taliban. Nor can I assure you that the Taliban are not diverting the money we are sending from the intended recipients, which are the poor Afghan people. As our 2023 high-risk list for Congress, which we were releasing today at this hearing, indicates, we face serious risk due to Taliban interference with UN and U.S. assistance, and we face a lack of aggressive oversight controls on the trust funds and the multilateral organizations. Which brings me to the issue that I know I've spoken before, but it's particularly a problem of the U.S. State Department and USAID's failure to fully cooperate with SIGAR audits and other inquiries. The lack of cooperation by state, and I'm not talking about the IGs, I'm talking about the Department of State and to a lesser extent USAID, is unprecedented in the nearly 12 years that I have been the SIGAR. I must add, in the 2 decades that I did congressional oversight, both in the Senate and the House. Due to this refusal to fully cooperate, a significant portion of SIGAR's work, including the 5 reports we did for this committee, have been hindered and delayed. So in conclusion, we need your help to stop this obfuscation and delay by the Department of State and, to some extent, USAID. As I'm sure my fellow inspectors general would agree, we cannot abide a situation in which agencies are allowed to pick and choose what information an IG gets, or who an IG can interview, or what an IG may report on. If permitted to continue, it will end SIGAR's work in Afghanistan, but also Congress's access to independent and credible oversight of any administration. Thank you very much, and I look forward to answering your questions.